The grand opening of the Ashford Zenith Hotel was a symphony of clinking champagne glasses and forced, high society laughter. For Brenda Collins, a junior intern at Ashford Media, it was less a party and more a high-stakes, nerve-wracking exam. She stood a few feet behind her boss, the formidable Christian Ashford, her role for the night to be invisible, efficient, and to anticipate his every need. The air crackled with a tension so thick, it was almost a physical presence. Across the room, Melissa, Christian's beautiful and very recent ex-fiancée, was holding court. On her arm, displaying a new, ostentatious diamond ring, was Edgar Thorne, a man who was not only Christian's biggest business rival, but until a month ago had been his best friend. They were not just a new couple, they were a newly engaged couple, a picture of triumphant, brutal betrayal. Then, Melissa made her move. She glided toward them, her smile a predatory slash of red lipstick. Her eyes swept over Brenda with dismissive indifference before landing on Christian. "Christian, darling," she purred, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Aren't you going to introduce me to your company?" The word company was an insult, designed to label Brenda as insignificant, a temporary placeholder. The air grew thick. This was a public challenge, a power play in front of his entire world. Brenda braced herself, expecting Christian to deliver a cold, cutting remark and dismiss them. Instead, he did something completely unexpected. He turned, and in one smooth, deliberate motion, he placed a hand on the small of Brenda's back. The touch was possessive, a silent, undeniable claim that sent a jolt of pure shock through her. He pulled her slightly forward to his side. "Melissa, Edgar," he said, his voice a mask of cool, unwavering confidence. "This is Brenda Collins." He paused, letting the tension build before delivering the final, devastating blow. "My fiancé." Brenda froze, her heart stopping in her chest. "Fiancé?" The word echoed in the sudden, stunned silence around them. Melissa's perfect smile faltered, her eyes wide with disbelief. Edgar looked equally floored. As the shockwave rippled through their small group, Christian leaned in, his lips brushing against Brenda's ear. The familiar, clean scent of his aftershave, something woody and sharp, like cedar and gin, filled her senses, clouding her panic. His voice was a low, urgent whisper, a sound no one else could hear. "Please, pretend to be my fiancé," he murmured. "I'll explain everything later. Just trust me." The command was there, but underneath it, she heard something she had never heard from the powerful Christian Ashford before. A raw, almost desperate plea. It was the first, tiny crack in his impenetrable armor. Brenda's mind raced, processing the chaos in a split second. She was on a stage she hadn't chosen, in a play she didn't know the lines to. But she was a performer. She looked past Christian, directly at Melissa's stunned face. A slow, sweet smile spread across her own lips. She extended her hand, her movements graceful and sure. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you," Brenda said, her voice a melody of warm confidence. "Christian has told me you two were close." The word close was delivered with the faintest, most brilliant hint of ironic pity, a masterpiece of subtext. It left Melissa speechless, and made Christian stare down at her, not with gratitude, but with a look of pure, startled, and grudging admiration. The game had just begun, and she had already proven she knew how to play. Hey, before we continue, tell me in the comments, what city and country are you watching from right now? I love connecting with our amazing audience from around the world. Let's move on. The moment they were out of sight, Christian's hand dropped from Brenda's back. He pulled her through a set of French doors onto a secluded, moonlit balcony, the cool night air a stark contrast to the heated tension of the ballroom. The mask of the adoring fiancé fell away, replaced by the sharp, analytical gaze of the CEO. "What was that?" he asked, his voice a low, dangerous murmur, a mixture of irritation and grudging admiration. "Clothes?" Brenda didn't flinch. She turned to face him, her own expression cool and defiant. "You put me on the stage, Mr. Ashford," she replied, her voice steady. "I just decided to perform." A slow, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. He had expected a panicked, pliable intern. He had gotten a co-conspirator. "Impressive," he conceded. He walked to the edge of the balcony, looking out at the city lights, gathering his thoughts. "But this doesn't end tonight." He turned back to her, all business now. "I need a fiancée, a believable one, to navigate the next few months of social and corporate events without looking like the man my ex-fiancée and my ex-best friend left in the dust." He laid it out with cold, transactional clarity. "It protects my image, which protects my business. It's a problem that needs a solution." "And I'm the solution," Brenda finished for him, her voice flat. "You are," he confirmed. He then made his offer. A bonus so generous, it made her breath catch. A promotion from intern to a special projects role, working directly with him. A life raft for the mountain of student debt she was drowning in. She felt a surge of anger at being used, but it was quickly overshadowed by the intoxicating pull of the opportunity. This was her chance. A chance to finally prove her worth, to have a seat at the table, not just serve the coffee. "I'll do it," she said. "But not just for a bonus. I want a real project to lead, something with substance. I want to prove my value to this company, not just to your ex-fiancée." He studied her for a long moment, a flicker of genuine surprise in his eyes. She was negotiating. "Very well," he agreed. "But understand this, Brenda. This is a business arrangement." He took a step closer, his presence seeming to shrink the balcony. "And that brings us to the most important rule. There is no room for emotion in this. No messy feelings, no complications. The first and only rule of our agreement is, you do not, under any circumstances, fall in love with me." The rule was delivered with a cold, arrogant finality, a clear warning that his heart was not part of the deal. Brenda let out a short, humorless laugh. She looked him up and down, her gaze deliberately dismissive. "Don't worry, Mr. Ashford," she said, her voice dripping with a confidence she didn't entirely feel. "My heart is in no danger with you." She turned to walk back into the party, but his voice stopped her. "Wait." She paused, her back to him. "For this to work," he said, his tone shifting slightly, "we need to be convincing. I need to know more about you, and you about me." He paused. "Our first real date is tomorrow. Lunch. And Brenda," he added, his voice a low command. "Call me Christian." The next morning, the office was buzzing with the news. The story of Christian Ashford's surprise engagement to a mysterious and brilliant young woman had already hit the society blogs. Brenda walked through the halls, her head held high, ignoring the whispers and the stunned stares of her former colleagues. Her first task was to prepare for their date. She spent the morning researching. Not him, but his past. She devoured every article about the golden couple, Christian and Melissa. The timeline was there in black and white, their engagement, their shared successes, and then the shocking, abrupt breakup just a month ago. As she scrolled through dozens of photos, she found it. A candid shot from a charity event a few months prior. Christian and Melissa were in the foreground, smiling for the camera. But in the background, almost out of focus, was Edgar Thorne. He wasn't looking at the camera. He was looking at Melissa, and the expression on his face was one of raw, unguarded desire. Brenda felt a chill run down her spine. She had seen that look before. The lunch was at a discreet, impossibly expensive restaurant. Christian, to her surprise, was surprisingly open, but she could sense it was a calculated openness. He was feeding her the lines for their story. "Melissa and I met in business school," he said, swirling the wine in his glass. "We were perfect on paper, driven, ambitious. A power couple." He sighed, a well-rehearsed sound of regret. But I was obsessed with work. I neglected her. I pushed her away. The breakup. It was my fault. He was painting a picture of himself as the classic workaholic who had lost the love of his life due to his own ambition. It was a good story, a believable one. But Brenda, armed with the knowledge from the photograph, saw the lie beneath the truth. He wasn't just telling her a backstory, he was practicing a narrative. She decided to test him. "It sounds like you still care about her a great deal," she said, her voice full of gentle, feigned sympathy. His reaction was instantaneous. A flicker of genuine, hopeful light sparked in his eyes. "I just think," he said, leaning forward slightly, his voice dropping, "that if she could see that I've changed, that I'm not just about work anymore, maybe things could be different." And there it was, the dark secret. It hit Brenda with the force of a physical blow. This entire engagement, this elaborate public farce, it wasn't about saving his reputation from Edgar and Melissa. It was about her. It was a grand, twisted, manipulative gesture designed to get Melissa's attention, to make her jealous, to win her back. Brenda wasn't his partner in revenge. She was a pawn. She was the bait in his sick, desperate game to reclaim his ex. At that exact moment, his phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at the screen, and his entire face lit up with a genuine, unguarded joy that made Brenda's stomach churn. "It's Melissa," he said, his voice breathless with an excitement he couldn't hide. "She wants to talk." He stood up abruptly, throwing a credit card on the table, his attention already a million miles away. He had completely forgotten Brenda was even there. "Thank you," he said distractedly as he rushed away. This was useful. Brenda sat alone at the table, surrounded by the trappings of a life she was supposed to be pretending to have. She watched him leave, her heart sinking into a cold, hard knot of humiliation and fury. The game had just been revealed, and she had no intention of being the losing piece. Brenda returned to the office, a cold, quiet fury simmering beneath her calm, professional facade. Useful. The word echoed in her mind. She wasn't his partner. She was a tool. A pawn in his pathetic, high-stakes game to win back a woman who had already chosen another man. Fine. If he wanted a convincing fiancée, he would get one. But she would play the part on her own terms. Later that afternoon, he called her into his office. He was still buzzing from his conversation with Melissa, a smug, self-satisfied energy radiating from him. "We have the annual Arts Foundation auction tonight," he announced, his tone brisk. "It's a key event. Melissa will be there. It's the perfect stage for our second act." He expected her to simply nod and follow his lead. "I agree," she said, her voice surprisingly bright. "But if we're going to be convincing as a couple, we need a better backstory than whirlwind romance. We need shared interests, a foundation." He looked at her, intrigued. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting," she said, a brilliant, dangerous idea forming in her mind, "that we buy our first piece of art together, as a couple, a symbol of our new life." Christian was impressed. The logic was sound. It was a smart, strategic move that would add a layer of authenticity to their farce. "An excellent idea, Brenda," he said, a genuine smile on his face. "Consider it approved." The auction was a glittering affair, held in a vast modern gallery, and just as Christian had predicted, Melissa and Edgar were there. Melissa watched them, her eyes sharp and analytical, trying to gauge the reality of their relationship. Brenda played her part to perfection. She moved through the crowd, her hand tucked in the crook of Christian's arm, pointing out pieces, whispering observations about brushwork and composition. Then she saw her opportunity. She led Christian to a small, unassuming painting by a relatively unknown artist. It was a moody, abstract piece. "This one," she said, her voice full of a feigned, breathless admiration. "It's perfect." Christian looked at the painting, unimpressed. "It's a bit bleak, don't you think?" I think it's passionate, she countered. As if on cue, she heard Melissa's distinct, dismissive laugh from behind them. Oh, that piece? Melissa said to a friend, just loud enough for them to hear. It's so derivative and depressing. I can't imagine who would ever want that hanging in their home. Brenda looked at Christian, her eyes wide with a manufactured hurt. But I love it, she whispered. It was the perfect move. In that moment, he had a choice. Agree with the sophisticated taste of his ex-fiancée or defend the honor of his new one. His jaw tightened. Then we'll get it, he said, his voice a low, protective growl. The bidding began. To Brenda's delight, another man in the front row, a wealthy-looking investor, seemed to be interested in the same piece. A bidding war erupted. Go on, Christian, Brenda whispered, her hand on his arm. Don't let him win. Caught up in the thrill of the competition, his pride on the line, Christian bid aggressively, driving the price higher and higher, far beyond the painting's actual worth. He won, the gavel falling with a satisfying thud. He turned to Brenda with a triumphant smile. Later, as they were waiting for the painting to be wrapped, the investor who had been bidding against them approached. He wasn't looking at Christian. He was looking at Brenda, a knowing, appreciative smile on his face. Congratulations, the man said to her. You played that beautifully. You made me drive up the price on your own boyfriend just for the sport of it. He chuckled. You are a brilliant negotiator. He walked away, leaving Christian standing there, his triumphant smile slowly fading as the realization crashed down on him. He looked at Brenda. He had been played. She hadn't just chosen a painting. She had chosen an opponent. She had manipulated him, using his own ego and his rivalry with Melissa against him, and had made him look like a passionate, lovesick fool in front of the entire room. He stared at her, his expression a mixture of pure, stunned shock and a new, dangerous, and undeniable respect. The pawn had just moved like a queen. Christian was furious and impressed. Brenda's stunt at the auction had been a masterful move, a public declaration that she would not be a passive piece in his game. The dynamic between them shifted again. The air in the office was thick with a new, unspoken respect and a simmering, electric tension. He was the boss, but she had proven she could be his equal in strategy and manipulation. A week later, he announced their next required appearance. The annual executive retreat is this weekend, he said, his voice carefully neutral. At the Ashford Vineyard. Attendance is mandatory. The retreat was a high-stakes weekend of workshops, networking, and schmoozing. And, to Brenda's horror, she discovered that to maintain the illusion of their engagement, they had been assigned to the same private, luxurious cabin. The tension in the small, intimate space was palpable. They drew an invisible line down the middle of the living area. He took the master bedroom. She took the guest room. But the forced proximity was a constant, unnerving presence. They would bump into each other in the small kitchen while getting coffee, a jolt of electricity passing between them. They would sit on opposite ends of the sofa at night, both pretending to work, both acutely, painfully aware of the other's presence. During the day, Brenda was a star. She was intelligent, charming, and her sharp insights during a brand strategy workshop impressed several of the company's most important clients. Christian watched her, a confusing mixture of pride and irritation churning in his gut. She was his greatest asset and his most formidable opponent. The breaking point came on the final night, during a large outdoor dinner party under the stars. The wine was flowing freely, and the atmosphere was relaxed. A rival CEO, a handsome, notorious playboy named Julian Croft, made a direct line for Brenda. I was incredibly impressed with your presentation today, Brenda, Julian said, his voice a smooth, charming purr. A mind like yours is wasted at Ashford Media. He smiled, a dazzling, predatory smile. My private cellar has a few vintages that would put this table wine to shame. Perhaps you'd care for a tour. Brenda, still committed to her game of testing Christian's limits, felt a thrill of dangerous power. She smiled back at Julian, a slow, considering smile. "That's a very tempting offer, Mr. Croft." She saw Christian across the lawn. He was watching them, his face a mask of stone, his eyes dark and unreadable. But she saw his hand, the one holding a wine glass, tighten until his knuckles were white. He began to walk toward them, his stride measured, controlled. But before he could reach them, Brenda turned back to Julian. "Thank you for the offer," she said, her voice clear and firm. "But I'm afraid my fiancé has a no-touch policy when it comes to his rival's assets." She had just used Christian's own cold corporate language against him, a public acknowledgement of their farce. She expected Christian to be furious. Instead, when he reached them, he did something completely unexpected. He ignored Julian entirely. He took the wineglass from Brenda's hand, took a slow, deliberate sip, and then, his eyes locked on hers, he said, "Our wine back at the cabin is better." He then turned to a stunned Julian Croft. "She's with me," he said, the words a simple statement of fact, a quiet, absolute claim. He placed a hand on the small of Brenda's back and guided her away, leaving the rival CEO speechless and Brenda's heart hammering against her ribs. His possessiveness, his quiet, unwavering claim on her, was no longer just a performance. It was becoming real. And it was confusing and terrifying and thrilling all at once. The walk back to the cabin was a silent, charged affair. The scent of pine and damp earth filled the cool night air, but neither of them noticed. The space between them crackled with the unspoken words from the party. The moment the cabin door closed behind them, Brenda spun around to face him. "What was that?" she demanded, her voice a furious whisper. "She's with me? You sounded like you owned me." "Did I?" he countered, his voice dangerously quiet as he loosened his tie. He walked to the small bar and poured himself a whiskey. "Perhaps I was just playing my part. The jealous, possessive fiancé. Isn't that the reaction you've been trying to provoke all week?" "This isn't a game anymore, Christian," she shot back, her frustration boiling over. "You're not just playing a part. You were genuinely angry. I saw it in your eyes." "And what if I was?" he retorted, turning to face her, his eyes blazing with an emotion she couldn't quite decipher. "What if I didn't like the way he looked at you? What if I didn't like the idea of him taking what is mine?" The word mine hung in the air, a raw, possessive claim. "I am not yours," she cried, her voice breaking with a mixture of anger and a strange, thrilling fear. "I am a business arrangement, a tool for your pathetic revenge scheme against Melissa." The name, Melissa, hit him like a physical blow. He flinched, and his anger seemed to drain away, replaced by a sudden weary vulnerability. "You're right," he admitted, his voice a hoarse, broken whisper. He sank onto the edge of the sofa, running a hand through his hair. "It started because of her, but it's not about her anymore. It hasn't been for a long time." He looked up at her, his carefully constructed armor completely gone, leaving only the raw, wounded man beneath. "I didn't like seeing him with you," he confessed, his voice barely audible. "And no, it had nothing to do with Melissa. It had everything to do with you. And that," he said, a look of pure self-loathing on his face, "terrifies me." It was the first truly honest, completely unguarded thing he had ever said to her. It was a confession of a feeling so powerful it had broken through his legendary control. Brenda stared at him, her own anger dissolving in the face of his raw vulnerability. The tension in the room shifted, the anger and the games replaced by something electric, uncertain, and undeniably real. He stood up and took a hesitant step toward her. "Brenda, He didn't finish the sentence. The shrill, piercing sound of the cabin's fire alarm suddenly ripped through the silence, its red light flashing, bathing the room in a frantic, pulsating glow. The moment was shattered. The confession was left hanging, incomplete, drowned out by the screeching, impersonal alarm. The fire alarm was, of course, a false alarm, triggered by a drunken guest in a neighboring cabin, but the damage was done. The raw, vulnerable moment between Christian and Brenda was obliterated, replaced by an awkward, suffocating silence. They returned to the city the next morning, the unspoken confession hanging between them like a ghost. Christian, terrified by his own emotional exposure, retreated back behind his walls of ice. He threw himself into his work, his interactions with Brenda becoming clipped and brutally professional. He was trying to put the genie back in the bottle, to pretend the night in the cabin had never happened. But Melissa Thorne, née Remington, sensed the shift in the winds. She had seen the way Christian had claimed Brenda at the retreat. She had heard the whispers about their devotion. Her plan to make Christian jealous had worked, but it had worked too well. He wasn't crawling back to her. He was genuinely moving on. And her pride could not allow that. She decided it was time to change tactics. She called Christian, her voice a carefully crafted melody of sadness and regret. "Chris," she began, using the old, intimate nickname. "Can we talk? I need to see you. I'm not happy." Christian, still confused and conflicted about his feelings for Brenda, felt a pang of his old, familiar sense of responsibility. He agreed to meet her for coffee at a discreet downtown cafe. At the cafe, Melissa played her part to perfection. She didn't talk about getting back together. Instead, she spoke of her new life with Edgar, her voice full of a subtle, tragic unhappiness. "He's a good man," she said with a sigh, stirring her latte. "But he's not you, Chris. He'll never be you." She looked up at him, her eyes wide and seemingly sincere. "And he's always been so jealous of your success, of our past." She leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Be careful, Christian. He's been making some aggressive moves in the market lately. I'm worried he might try to come after your company, just to prove he's better than you." It was a masterful move. She was not the aggressor. She was the concerned friend, the tragic ex, warning him about a threat from her new husband. She was planting a seed of doubt, positioning herself as an ally, a potential source of inside information in his war against Edgar. She was playing both sides. And then the universe delivered her a final, perfect gift. Brenda, on her way back from a meeting, decided to stop at that same cafe for a coffee to go. As she stood in line, she saw them, tucked away in a corner booth, their heads close together in intimate conversation. She couldn't hear their words, but she saw the scene. She saw the way Melissa placed a hand on Christian's arm, the look of deep, serious concern on his face as he listened to her. It was a confirmation of her deepest, most painful fear. The retreat, the confession, the almost kiss, it was all just a momentary lapse. He was still playing the game, and she was still just the pawn. Her heart, which had just begun to open to hope, slammed shut. A cold, familiar numbness washed over her. She didn't make a sound. She didn't let them see her. She simply turned, walked out of the cafe, and disappeared into the anonymous city crowd, her heart a block of ice in her chest. The sight of Christian and Melissa together in the cafe was a brutal confirmation of Brenda's worst fears. She retreated, her heart encased in a protective layer of ice. The next day at the office, she was a different person. The warm, challenging partner was gone, replaced by the cool, efficient, and utterly remote intern she had been on her first day. She was polite. She was professional. She was a ghost. Christian felt the shift immediately. The easy camaraderie, the charged silences, the shared glances, it was all gone. She responded to his questions with curt, direct answers. She avoided his gaze. She never entered his office unless specifically summoned. He was frustrated, confused, and to his own annoyance, deeply hurt. He didn't understand what had happened. The breaking point came during a high-stakes meeting with a potential new investor, a notoriously difficult man named Mr. Peterson. Brenda was presenting the market analysis, her voice clear and steady, her arguments flawless. In the middle of her presentation, Peterson, a man who enjoyed his own power, interrupted her. "That's a very passionate analysis, Miss Collins," he said, a dismissive, condescending smirk on his face. "But perhaps we should leave the numbers to the men in the room." The comment was a crude, sexist hand grenade thrown into the middle of the meeting. The room fell silent. Brenda froze for a fraction of a second, a familiar flush of humiliation creeping up her neck. Before she could even formulate a response, Christian spoke. His voice was not loud. It was a low, quiet, and absolutely lethal blade of ice. "Excuse me, Mr. Peterson," he said. Peterson, startled by the tone, turned to him. "Just a bit of levity, Ashford." "I don't find incompetence amusing," Christian replied, his eyes as cold as a winter storm. "Miss Collins is the most brilliant strategic mind in this company. Her analysis is the reason we are even considering this deal. If you are incapable of recognizing the talent sitting in front of you, then you are not the kind of partner we are interested in." He stood up, a clear, final dismissal. "This meeting is over." The investor, a man who controlled billions, stared, his face a mask of stunned disbelief. He had been publicly, brutally neutered. He stammered an apology and practically fled the room. The rest of the team quickly, silently filed out, leaving Brenda and Christian alone in the vast, silent boardroom. She was in shock. He had just risked, and likely lost, a multi-million-dollar contract to defend her honor. It was not a calculated move. It was not a performance. It was a raw, protective instinct. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered, her voice trembling. He turned to her, his expression serious, his anger gone, replaced by a deep, frustrating confusion. "Yes," he said, his voice a low growl. "I did. No one speaks to you that way." He took a step closer, his eyes searching hers. "What's wrong, Brenda?" he asked, his voice softening. "Talk to me. That day at the cafe with Melissa. It wasn't what you think." The memory of the cafe, of her own heartbreak, came rushing back. She took a step back, the wall of ice firmly back in place around her own heart. "It's fine, Christian," she said, her voice as cool and professional as his had ever been. "You don't owe me any explanations." She gathered her files. "After all, what we have is just business, isn't it?" The annual Ashford Media Company Gala was supposed to be the triumphant culmination of their public farce. It was a glittering, high-profile event, and Christian and Brenda, for all intents and purposes, were the king and queen of the ball. They moved through the room with a practiced, professional grace, the perfect power couple. But beneath the surface, a cold war was raging. Brenda was polite, charming, and utterly remote. Christian was frustrated, confused, and increasingly desperate to break through the wall of ice she had erected around herself. He had decided that tonight he would end the games. He would find a quiet moment, he would tell her the truth about Melissa, and he would confess the true depth of his feelings for her. His plan was derailed by the unexpected arrival of Melissa herself. She appeared at his side, alone this time, her face a mask of frantic emotional urgency. "Christian," she whispered, grabbing his arm, "I need to talk to you, alone, now." She glanced around the crowded room. "It's about Edgar. And about us." Christian felt a pang of his old, familiar sense of responsibility. He looked over at Brenda, who was engaged in a conversation across the room. "Brenda," he called out, "wait for me. I'll be right back." He followed Melissa to a small private lounge off the main ballroom, the heavy door closing behind them. "I made a mistake, Chris," Melissa began, her eyes filling with tears. "A terrible mistake. I left Edgar. I finally told him it was over. Being with him, it made me realize." She took a step closer, her hand coming up to his chest. "It's always been you. I still love you." Before Christian could even process her words, before he could form a response, she did something he never expected. In a move of pure, desperate finality, she threw her arms around his neck, stood on her toes, and kissed him. He was so stunned, so completely blindsided by her action, that for a split second he just stood there, frozen, his mind reeling. And that was the moment Brenda chose to come looking for him. Worried by his long absence, she had followed the path he had taken. She found the door to the lounge slightly ajar. She peered inside, and she saw it. She saw Melissa, her arms wrapped around Christian's neck. She saw them kissing. But what destroyed her, what shattered the last, tiny, hopeful piece of her heart, was not the kiss itself. It was his reaction, or rather his lack of one. He was just standing there, letting it happen. He wasn't pushing her away. He wasn't pulling back. He was just still. For Brenda, that stillness was a choice. It was acceptance. It was a confirmation of every fear she had ever had. She was the pawn. She had always been the pawn. And the game was finally, truly, over. She didn't make a sound. She didn't cry out. She simply backed away from the door, a silent, choking sob caught in her throat. She turned, and with her heart in a million pieces, she ran from the party, from the lie, from the man who had just, in the most brutal way possible, confirmed that he had never been hers at all. The moment Melissa's lips touched his, Christian's shock gave way to a cold, sharp clarity. This wasn't a kiss of passion. It was an act of possession, a final, desperate power play. He grabbed her by the arms and firmly pushed her away. "What are you doing?" he demanded, his voice a low, furious growl. "It's over, Melissa. It has been for a long time." He didn't wait for her reply. He turned and strode out of the lounge, his eyes scanning the crowded ballroom, searching for Brenda. But she was gone. A cold, sharp panic, an emotion he hadn't felt in years, seized him. He pulled out his phone, his fingers fumbling as he dialed her number. It went straight to voicemail. He tried again. Voicemail. He ran from the party, ignoring the confused calls of his colleagues, and jumped into his car. He sped through the city streets, his mind a chaotic storm. She had seen it. She must have seen it. And she had misinterpreted his shock as acceptance. He screeched to a halt in front of her apartment building. He ran to her door and pounded on it, his usual control completely gone. "Brenda, open the door!" he yelled, his voice raw with a desperation he didn't try to hide. "Please, it wasn't what it looked like. I didn't kiss her back." He was met with a dead, crushing silence from the other side of the door. He leaned his forehead against the cool wood, defeated. Just as he was about to turn away, the door opened. But it wasn't Brenda. It was her best friend, a woman named Sarah, her face a mask of pure, protective fury. "She doesn't want to talk to you," Sarah said, her voice a blade of ice, blocking the doorway. "She's already packed a bag. She's gone." The words hit him like a physical blow. "Gone? Gone where?" "Away from you," Sarah retorted with contempt. "And you want to know the worst part? The most heartbreaking part?" She took a step closer, her eyes blazing. She saw the kiss, and the only thing she said, through her tears, was, "It's my fault. I knew it was a game, and I let myself fall in love anyway." The revelation that Brenda was blaming herself, that she saw his betrayal as her own failure, was a pain more profound than any business loss, any public scandal. It was a complete and utter devastation of his soul. As he stood there, reeling from the news, another figure appeared in the doorway of the building, looking frantic and disheveled. It was Edgar Thorne. "Ashford," Edgar said, his voice breathless, desperate. "I need to talk to you. It's about Melissa." Christian, his mind a tempest of rage and grief, turned on him. "Get out of here, Thorne," he snarled. "You've done enough damage." "No, you don't understand," Edgar insisted, stepping forward. "She's not who you think she is. You don't know the half of it." The arrival of his greatest rival, his ex-best friend, at the absolute lowest moment of his life, created a scene of impossible, explosive confrontation. Christian was trapped, caught between the woman he had just lost and the man who held the key to the truth he never knew. Christian stared at Edgar, a cold, murderous rage building in his chest. "You have 5 seconds to get out of my sight before I do something we both regret," he growled. "Just listen to me," Edgar pleaded, his usual arrogance completely gone, replaced by a desperate, sweaty fear. "Melissa didn't leave me because she still loves you. She left me because I confronted her, because I found out what she was really doing." Despite his anger, a flicker of curiosity pierced through Christian's grief. "What are you talking about?" Edgar pulled out his phone, his hands trembling. "She wasn't just your fiancée, Chris. She was a corporate spy." He showed Christian the screen. It was filled with emails, text messages, and encrypted files. Proof. Undeniable proof that Melissa, during the last year of their engagement, had been systematically leaking sensitive information from Ashford Media directly to Edgar at Thorne Industries. She had fed him insider knowledge on pending deals, marketing strategies, and proprietary technology, giving Thorne Industries an unprecedented advantage in the market. "The reason your father threatened her," Edgar confessed, his voice full of a bitter, self-loathing shame. "It wasn't because he found out about us. It was because his security team discovered the data breach. He knew she was the leak. He threatened to expose her for corporate espionage if she didn't disappear quietly." The Christian's world tilted on its axis. The story he had believed for years, the story of a simple, painful affair, was a lie. It had been a calculated, brutal act of corporate warfare. But Edgar wasn't finished. The final revelation was the most devastating of all. "She didn't kiss you tonight out of love, Chris," Edgar said, his voice cracking. "She told me her plan. She knew you were falling for your new fiancé. She saw how happy you were becoming, and she couldn't stand it." He looked Christian in the eye, the truth a final, bitter pill. She wanted Brenda to see it. She wanted to destroy any chance you had at happiness, because you had become more successful, more powerful without her than she ever could have been with the information she stole. The kiss wasn't an act of passion. It was an act of war. The full, horrifying picture slammed into place. He hadn't just been betrayed in the past. He had been actively, maliciously sabotaged in the present. Melissa hadn't just broken his heart years ago. She had returned to try and salt the earth of his entire life. He thought of Brenda. He thought of her running away, blaming herself, believing she was the fool in a game where she had been the only innocent player. A cold, terrifying clarity washed over him. The grief, the anger, the confusion, it all coalesced into a single, sharp point of purpose. He pushed past Edgar, ignoring him completely. He pulled out his own phone and dialed a number he rarely used, the direct line to his head of security, a man who could find anyone, anywhere. "I need you to find Brenda Collins," Christian said, his voice no longer that of a desperate lover, but of a powerful, focused CEO on a mission. "Use every resource we have. I don't care about the cost. I don't care what it takes." He paused, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl. "Just find her." Brenda had run. She had taken the first bus out of the city, ending up in a small, quiet coastal town where the air smelled of salt and rain. She found a simple hotel room with a window that looked out onto the gray, churning ocean, a perfect mirror for the storm inside her. The pain of Christian's betrayal was a constant, physical ache, but beneath it, a stubborn fire began to burn. She would not be a victim. She would not let his cruel game be the end of her story. Determined to reclaim her life, she threw herself into the only thing she could control: her future. She spent hours polishing her resume and sending out applications, her nights haunted by memories of shared laughter and a single devastating kiss. A week later, an email landed in her inbox that made her heart stop. It was from a major marketing firm. They had seen her presentation at the Ashford Media Board meeting and were impressed. They were offering her a job. The offer was fantastic. A senior management position, a salary that was more than she had ever dreamed of, and a chance to prove her worth on her own terms, far from Christian's shadow. It was the validation she craved. As she sat in her quiet hotel room, staring at the offer on her laptop screen, a soft, hesitant knock came at the door. Her heart pounded. Cautiously, she opened it. It was Christian. He stood there, looking tired, his immaculate suit slightly rumpled. The powerful CEO was gone. In his place was a man who looked like he had been to hell and back. "How did you find me?" she whispered, her voice trembling, a wall of anger and hurt rising instantly. "I would have found you anywhere," he said, his voice quiet, serious. He didn't try to enter. "Brenda, please, don't close the door. Just give me 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." She wanted to slam the door in his face, but the raw desperation in his eyes, the complete absence of his usual arrogance, held her in place. She stepped back, leaving the door open. He walked in and stopped in the middle of the small room, looking completely out of place. "I'm not here to ask you to come back," he began, the words surprising her. "I'm not here to make excuses. I'm here to tell you the truth." He told her everything. He recounted Edgar's desperate confession, the details of Melissa's corporate espionage, the real reason for his father's threats years ago. He laid the entire ugly, complicated truth bare before her, his voice raw with a shame he didn't try to hide. "The kiss you saw," he finished, his voice cracking, "wasn't a moment of passion. It was an assassination attempt, and your heart was the intended target. She wanted to destroy any chance of happiness I had, and she knew that meant destroying you." Brenda sank onto the edge of the bed, her legs suddenly weak, the sheer multi-layered deception of it all washing over her. She had been a pawn in a game far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. "I know this doesn't change what I did," he continued, his voice dropping to a raw, pleading whisper. "I still used you. I started this whole thing with the worst possible intentions. I was arrogant and cruel, and I broke your trust in a way that is probably unforgivable." He took a hesitant step closer. "But I need you to know, Brenda. I need you to know that somewhere along the way, the game ended for me. I don't know when. Maybe it was at the auction when you outsmarted me. Maybe it was at the retreat when you called me a hypocrite. Or maybe it was the first moment I saw you at that gala." He stopped a few feet from her, his heart in his eyes. "I fell in love with you. I am so completely, terrifyingly in love with you. And that is the only part of this entire mess that was ever real." Tears streamed down her face as she listened. It was the confession she had dreamed of, wrapped in the nightmare of their reality. "I love you too, Christian," she whispered, the admission a painful, honest truth. "I think I have for a while. But that doesn't fix this." She looked around the small, anonymous hotel room. "I don't know who I am anymore. I don't know what's real. I look at you and I see the man who saved me and the man who broke me, all at the same time. I need time. I need to find myself again, away from you, away from all of this." He looked utterly devastated, but he nodded, a slow, painful acceptance. He understood. He had created this damage, and he couldn't demand that she heal on his timeline. He glanced at the glowing laptop screen on the desk. "The job offer," he said, his voice full of a profound, heartbreaking respect. "I know about it. You should take it. You've earned it. You deserve a chance to build something that is entirely your own." He backed away toward the door, giving her the space she had just asked for. "I just wanted you to know the truth," he said one last time. "Goodbye, Brenda." He turned and walked away, leaving her alone in the quiet room. He was letting her go. He was giving her the freedom she thought she wanted, the independent life she had just been offered. And as she watched him turn his back, his shoulders slumped with a defeat that had nothing to do with business, she was faced with a choice. The perfect, successful life she had just been offered, or the broken, complicated, but undeniably real man who was walking out of her life forever. Brenda stood frozen in the doorway of her hotel room, watching Christian walk away. The job offer on her laptop screen glowed, a beacon of a safe, successful, and completely empty future. "Wait!" The word escaped her lips before she even realized she had decided. He stopped, his back still to her. "You can't just drop a bomb like that and walk away, Ashford," she said, a new fierce energy surging through her. "You don't get to be the noble, tragic hero. Not after what you put me through." He turned slowly, a flicker of confused hope in his eyes. "You're right," she said, walking toward him, her old fire returning. "I do deserve that job, but I'm not taking it." "Why not?" "Because," she said, stopping in front of him, "the CEO of that company, a man named Robert Peterson, is a known associate of Edgar Thorne. He's trying to acquire Ashford Media's radio division, and he wants to hire me, the woman who has intimate knowledge of your company's inner workings, right after your biggest rival tried to sabotage you. That's not a job offer, Christian. That's a declaration of war. And he thinks I'm going to be his weapon against you." Christian stared at her, his mind racing, connecting the dots. She was right. This wasn't a coincidence. It was another, more sophisticated attack. "So what are you going to do?" he asked, his voice a low, intense murmur. A slow, dangerous smile spread across her face. "I'm going to take the job," she said. He looked at her, shocked. "Brenda, no." "And," she continued, her eyes sparkling with a brilliant strategic light, "I'm going to become your inside source, your Trojan horse. I'm going to tear them down from the inside for what they tried to do to you and for what they tried to do to me." He was speechless. He had come here to set her free, and instead, she was offering to go back to war, not for him, but with him. "You don't have to do this," he said, his voice full of a raw, protective instinct. "I know," she replied, "but I want to. We started this together, Christian. Let's finish it." The next month was a whirlwind of high-stakes corporate espionage. Brenda accepted the job at Peterson's company, playing the part of the scorned, vengeful ex-employee perfectly. She fed them useless, misleading information while secretly funneling Peterson's real strategies and vulnerabilities back to Christian. They worked in secret, meeting late at night in quiet, out-of-the-way places. Their relationship now a thrilling, dangerous partnership. The lines between their personal feelings and their professional mission blurred completely. They were a team, a formidable, unstoppable force. The admiration between them grew with every successful move, every shared secret. They were no longer just falling in love. They were forging a bond in the fires of their shared battle, a bond of trust, respect, and a deep, powerful connection that was more real than any contract. The final move was a masterpiece of corporate warfare, orchestrated by two brilliant minds working in perfect sync. Using the information Brenda had gathered, Christian was able to anticipate and counter every one of Peterson's moves in the attempted hostile takeover. He didn't just defend against the attack. He turned it around, exposing Peterson's illegal market manipulation tactics to the board and the SEC. The fallout was swift and brutal. Peterson was forced out of his own company in disgrace, his reputation in tatters. The war was over. Brenda and Christian stood in the silent, empty boardroom of Peterson's former company in the middle of the night, the victory finally, completely, theirs. They were exhausted, but a triumphant electric energy crackled between them. "We did it," she said, a slow, satisfied smile on her face. "Yes," he replied, his eyes fixed on her, full of an admiration so profound it was almost tangible. "We did." He didn't kiss her. He didn't pull her into a passionate embrace. He did something far more significant. He walked over to the head of the long, polished table and pulled out a chair. "Sit down, Brenda." Confused, she did as he asked. He then walked to the other side of the table and handed her a thick, leather-bound folder. "I prepared this while we were working," he said. She opened it. Inside were not financial reports or legal documents. It was a meticulously detailed business plan. The title on the cover read, "Ashford & Collins Consulting, a Strategic Partnership." She looked up at him, her heart pounding. "I don't want to be your boss anymore, Brenda," he said, his voice quiet, serious. "And I don't want you to work for me. I want to be your partner, in everything." The folder contained the legal documents for the creation of a new independent strategic consulting firm, with two names listed as equal, founding partners, Christian Ashford and Brenda Collins. "I've already secured our first client," he continued, a small, proud smile on his face. "Ashford Media. They're prepared to offer us a very lucrative long-term contract." He was not offering her a job. He was not offering her a gift. He was offering her an empire of her own, a seat at the table as his equal, a partnership built not on a lie or a contract of convenience, but on a foundation of mutual respect and shared brilliance. He looked at her, his heart in his eyes, waiting for her answer. "So, what do you say, partner?" he asked, his voice a low, hopeful murmur. 6 months later, the air in the newly renovated downtown office buzzed with the sound of clinking champagne glasses and excited, powerful conversations. The grand opening of Ashford & Collins Consulting was the most talked-about event of the season. The space, which had once been a dusty, forgotten floor in a prime real estate building, was now a testament to Brenda's vision. Modern, vibrant, and filled with light. It was a space designed for collaboration and innovation, the complete antithesis of Christian's cold, minimalist fortress. At the center of it all stood Christian and Brenda, side by side, greeting their guests not as a scandalous couple, but as equal, formidable partners. They were the new power duo in the city, their story now a legend in business circles, a story of rivalry, redemption, and a partnership forged in fire. Brenda moved through the crowd with a confidence that was entirely her own. She was no longer the timid intern or the vengeful pawn. She was a CEO, a founder, a woman who had built her own table instead of waiting for a seat at someone else's. She laughed as she spoke with a group of investors, her arguments sharp, her wit undeniable. From across the room, Christian watched her, a look of profound, quiet adoration on his face. He saw his father, a man notoriously difficult to impress, engaged in an animated conversation with Brenda, a genuine smile on his face as he listened to her explain her vision for the company's philanthropic arm. The success of their new venture was a testament to their strength as a team, a partnership that had proven to be more powerful than any solo empire. Later that night, after the last of the guests had departed, a peaceful, satisfied silence settled over the office. The scent of champagne and success lingered in the air. Brenda stood by the massive window, looking out at the glittering city lights, a city that no longer felt like a place of defeat, but a place of infinite possibility. Christian came up behind her, his arms wrapping gently around her waist. He didn't speak, simply resting his chin on her shoulder, sharing the quiet, triumphant moment with her. "We did it," she whispered, leaning back against his chest, the solid, familiar feel of him a comforting anchor. "No," he murmured into her hair, his voice a low, warm rumble. "You did it. I just provided the funding. This," he gestured to the beautiful office around them, "is all you, your vision, your strength." She turned in his arms to face him, a playful, challenging glint in her eye. "Are you trying to get out of doing your share of the work, Mr. Ashford?" He chuckled, a real happy sound that still made her heart skip a beat. "Never, Miss Collins. I'm just a humble senior partner, here to support the brilliant CEO." His expression turned serious, his eyes searching hers. "Are you happy, Brenda?" he asked, his voice full of a raw, hopeful vulnerability. "Truly happy." "I am," she said, her voice soft but sure. "I have my work, my independence, my self-respect." She reached up, her hand gently cupping his cheek. "The only thing missing is a signed contract." A flicker of the old, familiar tension passed between them. He led her to the large, modern conference table where a single, leather-bound document sat. It was the final official partnership agreement for Ashford & Collins Consulting. "Just one last signature," he said, his voice a little tight. He slid the document and a heavy, expensive pen across the table to her. Then it's all official. She picked up the pen, the weight of it familiar in her hand. She looked at the document, at the culmination of their long, complicated journey. She looked at him, at the man who had broken her, and then had broken himself to put her back together. She smiled, a slow, mysterious smile that made his heart pound. "I think," she said, tapping the pen thoughtfully against her chin, "that this contract is missing a clause." He looked at her, confused. "A clause? I had my legal team go over it 3 times. It's ironclad." "It's missing the most important clause of all," she replied. She took the pen, and, on the final page, just above the 2 neat lines for their signatures, she began to write. Her handwriting was elegant, confident. Clause 15. The senior partner, Christian Ashford, hereby agrees to love, honor, and cherish the founding partner, Brenda Collins, for the rest of his life. He further agrees to never again let his fear outweigh his heart, and to submit all future emotional disputes to a lifelong process of honest communication and mutual respect. She paused, then added one final line. This clause is permanent, non-negotiable, and effective immediately upon the signing of a marriage license. She turned the contract around and pushed it back toward him. "There," she said, her eyes sparkling with love and a triumphant, playful challenge. "Now it's perfect." Christian stared at the handwritten clause, his eyes scanning the words. He read it once, then twice. A slow, incredulous smile spread across his face, a smile that started in his eyes and lit up his entire being. He looked up at her, at the brilliant, defiant, incredible woman who had not only become his equal, but had just outmaneuvered him one last time. He let out a loud, genuine laugh, a sound of pure, unadulterated joy that echoed through their new, shared empire. He didn't say a word. He simply took the pen and, with a firm, steady hand, signed his name on the line beneath hers. He then walked around the table, pulled her to her feet, and into a deep, passionate kiss that sealed their final, most important deal. "I agree to your terms, Miss Collins," he whispered against her lips. "Contract accepted." Our story ends here, but many more are waiting for you. Subscribe. Tell me in the comments what you felt about this one, and we'll meet again very soon. Thank you, and see you in the next story.